The whiskey bottle shattered against the saloon wall 3 inches from Evangeline Porter's head, and she didn't even flinch because, after 6 months in Redemption, Texas, she had learned that showing fear only made the wolves circle closer. It was March of 1876, and the small cattle town situated 40 miles west of San Antonio had become both her prison and her refuge, a place where she had fled to escape one scandal only to find herself at the center of another. The bottle had been thrown by Martha Henley, the blacksmith's wife, a woman whose face had turned red as a summer tomato the moment Evangeline walked through the swinging doors of the Lucky Star Saloon. Martha stood now with her arms crossed over her ample bosom, her lips pursed so tight they had gone white at the edges. "Jezebel," Martha hissed, and the word carried through the sudden silence like a rattlesnake's warning. "You got some nerve showing your face in decent company." Evangeline kept her chin high, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had come to the saloon not for drink or company, but because old Samuel Wright, the owner, had promised her work washing glasses and wiping tables. It wasn't much, but it was honest labor, and honest labor was something she desperately needed. Her small room above the general store cost $3 a week, and her savings from St. Louis had dwindled to almost nothing. "I am just here to work, Mrs. Henley," Evangeline said quietly, keeping her voice steady. "I mean no trouble to anyone." "Work." Martha's laugh was sharp and ugly. "Is that what you call it? We all know what kind of work a woman like you does. Coming here from St. Louis with no husband, no family, no explanation. Wearing them fancy dresses and acting like you're better than the rest of us." The other patrons in the saloon had gone quiet, watching the confrontation with the hungry interest of people starved for entertainment. Evangeline could feel their eyes on her, could feel the weight of their judgment. She had felt it every day since arriving in Redemption, that suffocating pressure of being watched, whispered about, condemned. "That is enough, Martha," said a voice from the doorway, and every head turned. The man who stood silhouetted against the bright Texas sunlight was tall and broad-shouldered, with the easy, loose-limbed stance of someone comfortable in his own skin. He wore dusty brown pants, a chambray shirt faded from countless washings, and a black Stetson that shadowed his face. When he stepped inside, the light caught his features, and Evangeline felt her breath catch despite herself. He had a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and eyes the color of creek water in summer, that clear greenish blue that seemed to see right through a person. "This ain't your concern, Cole Brennan," Martha said, but her voice had lost some of its venom. Cole Brennan removed his hat and held it loosely in his hands, revealing dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with the weathered skin of a man who spent his days under the sun. Evangeline had seen him around town before, had heard his name spoken with respect by the ranch hands and shopkeepers. He owned a spread north of town, ran cattle, kept to himself mostly. "Actually, it is my concern," Cole said, his voice low and calm but carrying an edge of steel. "Miss Porter is going to be my wife, and I would appreciate it if you would show her the respect she deserves." The silence that followed was so complete that Evangeline could hear the creak of the saloon's wooden signs swinging outside. Her own shock was so profound that for a moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at this stranger who had just claimed her as his intended. Martha's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on a riverbank. "Your wife, Cole Brennan, you cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious," Cole said. He crossed the room in long, measured strides and stopped beside Evangeline. Up close, she could smell leather and horse and something clean like soap. "We have been courting privately, not wanting to cause a fuss, but since there seems to be some confusion about Miss Porter's character, I figure it is time to make our intentions public." Evangeline's mind raced. This was madness. She had never spoken more than a few words to Cole Brennan in passing. Why would he lie for her? What did he want? But even as these questions tumbled through her thoughts, she recognized the lifeline he was offering. In the rigid social structure of a small Texas town, being an engaged woman was worlds different from being a single woman with a questionable past. She felt Cole's hand settle gently on the small of her back, a touch that was somehow both presumptuous and protective. He looked down at her, and his creekwater eyes held a message she couldn't quite read. "Trust me," they seemed to say, "just for now, trust me." "Is this true, Evangeline?" asked Samuel right from behind the bar. The old man's face was creased with confusion, but also something that might have been relief. He had been kind to her, one of the few people in redemption who had not immediately condemned her, and she knew he hated the conflict her presence caused in his establishment. Evangeline swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain her independence, to not trade one complicated situation for another. But Martha Henley was still glaring at her with undisguised hatred, and behind Martha stood half a dozen other townspeople whose faces reflected similar sentiments. She thought of the room she might lose, the work she desperately needed, the constant weight of their suspicion and scorn. "Yes," she heard herself say, "it is true." Cole's hand pressed more firmly against her back, a gesture of approval or perhaps relief. "We plan to marry in a few weeks, soon as the circuit preacher comes through. In the meantime, Evangeline will be staying at the boarding house where Mrs. Ferguson can chaperone proper. I will be paying her rent and expenses, as is fitting for a man caring for his intended." Martha's face had progressed from red to an alarming shade of purple. "Well, I never," she sputtered. "Cole Brennan, your father would be spinning in his grave to see you take up with a woman of questionable virtue." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cole's jaw tightened, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but dangerous. "My father taught me to judge people by their actions, not by rumors spread by folks with nothing better to do than tear others down. He also taught me that a man protects what is his. Evangeline is under my protection now, and anyone who insults her insults me. I suggest you think carefully about whether you want to continue this conversation, Mrs. Henley." Martha opened her mouth, closed it, then spun on her heel and marched out of the saloon with all the dignity she could muster. The other patrons suddenly became very interested in their drinks, their card games, anything that would avoid Cole's steady gaze. Samuel cleared his throat. "Well then. Congratulations to you both. Miss Porter, I reckon you won't be needing that job after all." Cole nodded to the old man. "We appreciate your kindness to Evangeline, Samuel. You are a good man." He turned to Evangeline, and his voice dropped lower, meant only for her ears. "We should talk. Somewhere private." Evangeline managed a nod, her thoughts still spinning. She allowed Cole to guide her out of the saloon, his hand never leaving the small of her back. The afternoon sun was bright and hot, making her squint after the dimness inside. The main street of Redemption stretched before them, a wide dirt road lined with wooden buildings. The general store, the bank, the telegraph office, the land office, the doctor's surgery, the church with its white-painted steeple. Horses stood hitched to posts, flicking their tails at flies. A wagon rattled past, loaded with supplies. Cole led her down a side street to a small park area where someone had planted cottonwood trees that provided a bit of shade. A wooden bench sat beneath one of the trees, and he gestured for her to sit. He remained standing, turning his hat in his hands, and for the first time since he had walked into the saloon, he looked uncertain. "I suppose you want an explanation," he said finally. "That would be helpful, yes," Evangeline replied, finding her voice. "Mr. Brennan, I am grateful for what you did back there, truly I am, but I do not understand why you did it. We barely know each other." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. "I know what it is like to be judged unfairly," he said at last. "To have people make up their minds about you based on things that aren't true or aren't the whole story. I have been watching the way this town treats you, Miss Porter, and it does not sit right with me." "So this is charity?" Evangeline asked, and she couldn't keep the edge from her voice. She had dealt with enough men who offered help with strings attached. "What do you get out of this arrangement, Mr. Brennan?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she fought the urge to glance away from the intensity of his gaze. "Honestly, peace. I am tired of every matchmaking mama in 3 counties throwing their daughters at me. I am tired of being invited to dinners and socials with the expectation that I will choose a wife like picking out a horse. If we are engaged, all that stops. And when the circuit preacher comes through in a few weeks, what happens then?" Cole sat down on the bench beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "That is up to you. We can go through with the marriage if you want. It would be a business arrangement, nothing more. You would have my name, my protection, and a home. I would get peace and quiet and someone to help run the household. Or, if you prefer, we can break the engagement and you can move on to another town with enough money to start fresh and a story that makes you seem respectable. I will be the heartbroken party and you will be the woman who got away. Your reputation will be intact." Evangeline studied his face, looking for the deception, the hidden motive. She had been fooled before by a handsome face and pretty words. That was how she had ended up fleeing St. Louis in the first place, but Cole Brennan's expression was open, honest, almost painfully sincere. "Why do I feel there is more to this than you are saying?" she asked quietly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Because you are perceptive. The truth is, Miss Porter, I am lonely. My parents are gone, I have no siblings, and running a ranch is hard work that leaves little time for socializing. The idea of having someone to talk to at the end of the day, even if it is just an arrangement of convenience, has appeal. But I will not lie to you, and I will not force anything. If we do this, we do it with clear terms and mutual respect." Evangeline looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. Her dress was one of the fancy ones Martha had mentioned, a deep green silk that she had bought in St. Louis when she had been someone else, living a different life. It was too fine for redemption, she knew, marking her as an outsider, as someone with secrets. She had 3 more dresses like it and a small jewelry box with pearls and garnets, all remnants of the life she had fled. "The town gossips," she said slowly. "They call me a Jezebel." "Do you want to know why?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "Only if you want to tell me. We all have pasts, Miss Porter. I am more interested in who you are now than who you were then." The kindness in his words made her throat tight. She had been prepared for demands, for interrogation, for judgment. She had not been prepared for simple, uncomplicated kindness. "My name is Evangeline Porter," she began, her voice soft. "That much is true. I am 23 years old and I came to redemption from St. Louis 6 months ago. In St. Louis, I was engaged to a man named Charles Whitmore. He was a banker, wealthy, well-connected. My family thought I was making a brilliant match." She paused, the memories bitter on her tongue. What they did not know was that Charles already had a wife. She lived in Chicago and he kept her existence secret while he courted me in St. Louis. I did not discover the truth until 2 weeks before our wedding when his wife appeared at my door. Cole made a low sound of anger, but he did not interrupt. "The scandal was enormous," Evangeline continued. "Charles disappeared, probably back to Chicago. But I was the one left to face the consequences. People assumed I had known about his wife, that I was trying to steal another woman's husband. My father, trying to salvage the family name, suggested I leave town until things calmed down. So I took what money I had and came here to redemption, thinking I could start over. But gossip travels, apparently, or perhaps I simply look like the kind of woman who would cause trouble." "You look like a beautiful woman who has been hurt," Cole said quietly. "And small-minded people are always suspicious of beauty they do not understand." Evangeline felt heat rise in her cheeks. She was not used to such direct compliments, especially not from men who seemed to want nothing in return. "Thank you for that. But you should know that agreeing to help me may damage your own reputation. The town already seems to have decided I am not respectable." "Let me worry about my reputation," Cole said. He stood and offered her his hand. "What do you say, Miss Porter? Will you accept my offer?" We can figure out the details as we go, but for now it solves both our problems." Evangeline looked at his outstretched hand. It was a large hand, weathered and calloused from hard work, honest work. She thought about her dwindling savings, her tiny room above the general store, the constant whispers and hostile stares. She thought about Martha Henley's face when Cole had called her his intended, the way the woman had deflated like a punctured balloon. She placed her hand in his and let him help her to her feet. "All right, Mr. Brennan, I accept your offer, but we should set some ground rules." "Call me Cole," he said, still holding her hand. "And I agree. How about we discuss it over dinner? There is a decent restaurant near the hotel. It will give the town something to talk about besides malicious gossip." Despite everything, Evangeline felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Very well, Cole, lead the way." They walked back to the main street together, and Evangeline was acutely aware of the eyes following them, the way conversations stopped as they passed. But Cole seemed entirely unbothered, nodding pleasantly to the people they encountered, his hand resting lightly on her elbow in a gesture that was both possessive and protective. The restaurant was a small establishment called Mary's Kitchen, run by a plump, cheerful woman who served simple but hearty food. Mary herself looked surprised when Cole and Evangeline entered together, but she recovered quickly and showed them to a table near the window. "Well, Cole Brennan, this is a surprise," Mary said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "And you must be Miss Porter. I have seen you around town." "Mary, I would like to introduce you to my fiancé," Cole said smoothly. "We are making the announcement official." Mary's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "Fiancé? Well, my goodness, congratulations to you both. This certainly is news." "We would appreciate your discretion until we have had a chance to tell more people personally," Cole said, though Evangeline suspected he knew full well that Mary would have the news spread across town before nightfall. That was likely his intention. They ordered roast chicken and vegetables, and after Mary bustled away, Cole leaned back in his chair and regarded Evangeline thoughtfully. "So, ground rules. You mentioned wanting to set some." Evangeline folded her hands on the table. "If we are going to do this, even temporarily, we need to be honest with each other. No secrets, no surprises, and we need to decide what happens if one of us wants to end the arrangement." "Agreed," Cole said. "Anything else?" "If we do end up going through with the marriage, I want to be clear about expectations. You mentioned it would be a business arrangement. I need to know what that means exactly." Cole's expression became serious. "It means separate bedrooms, unless and until you decide otherwise. It means I will provide for you financially and protect your reputation, but I will not expect anything of you that you are not willing to give. It means we are partners, not master and servant. You will have say in how the household is run, and I will consult you on decisions that affect us both." The knot of tension in Evangeline's chest loosened slightly. "That sounds fair, and if I choose to leave after a few months, then you leave with enough money to establish yourself somewhere new and a letter of reference from me saying you are of good character. I will tell people we realized we did not suit, that it was a mutual decision made with respect on both sides." "You have thought about this quite a bit," Evangeline observed. Cole shrugged. "I have had some time to consider it. I saw you walk into that saloon and I saw the look on Martha Henley's face. I knew something was about to happen, and I suppose I just made a quick decision. A decision that will affect both our lives significantly," Evangeline pointed out. "True," Cole acknowledged. "But sometimes the best decisions are the ones made quickly, before we have time to talk ourselves out of them." Their food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. The chicken was good, roasted with herbs and served with mashed potatoes and green beans. Evangeline realized she was hungrier than she had thought. She had been so anxious about going to the saloon that she had skipped breakfast. "Tell me about your ranch," she said after a while. "You mentioned it is north of town." Cole's face brightened, and Evangeline realized this was a topic he enjoyed. It is about 5 miles north in a valley between two low hills. I have about 300 acres, most of it grazing land for cattle. There is a main house, a barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and various outbuildings. My father started the ranch 30 years ago, and I inherited it when he passed 5 years ago. I am sorry for your loss, Evangeline said softly. Thank you. He was a good man. Taught me everything I know about ranching, about treating people fairly, about standing up for what is right even when it is difficult. Cole paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. I think he would have liked you. You do not even know me, Evangeline protested, though she felt oddly pleased by the comment. I know you have the courage to start over in a place where you knew no one, Cole said. I know you hold your head high even when people are cruel to you. I know you did not crumble when Martha Henley threw that bottle at your head. That tells me plenty. Evangeline felt heat rise in her cheeks again. She was not used to being seen so clearly, to having someone look past the surface and recognize the strength it took just to keep going day after day. They finished their meal and stepped back out into the late afternoon sun. The street was busier now, with people finishing their workday and heading home. Evangeline saw several women clustered outside the general store, their heads bent together in conversation. When they spotted Cole and Evangeline, their whispers intensified. News travels fast, Cole murmured. I expect we will have quite a few visitors over the next few days, all wanting to congratulate us and fish for details. How should we handle that? Evangeline asked. With grace and minimal information, Cole replied. We tell them we have been courting quietly, that we plan to marry when the preacher comes through, and that we appreciate their well wishes. If they push for more, we simply say we prefer to keep our private business private. They walked to the boarding house where Cole had suggested Evangeline stay. It was a large, 2-story building run by Mrs. Ferguson, a widow in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Cole spoke with Mrs. Ferguson privately for a few minutes while Evangeline waited in the parlor, and when he emerged, he nodded to her. All arranged. Mrs. Ferguson will move you in tomorrow. I paid for the next month in advance. That is very generous, Evangeline said. I will pay you back once I find work. There is no need, Cole said. But if it makes you feel better, you can help me with some things at the ranch. Bookkeeping, correspondence, that sort of thing. I am decent with numbers, but I hate writing letters, and there is always a stack of them waiting. I can do that, Evangeline agreed. She had been well educated, had helped her father with his business correspondence before the scandal. It would be good to feel useful again. Cole walked her back to the general store where she was still renting her room for one more night. At the door, he paused and looked down at her. In the fading light, his eyes looked more green than blue. Thank you for trusting me today, he said. I know it was a leap of faith. Thank you for offering me a way out, Evangeline replied. I do not know why you did it, not really, but I am grateful. Cole smiled, and the expression transformed his face, made him look younger and more carefree. Maybe I did it because I think you deserve better than what this town has given you. Maybe I did it because I recognize a kindred spirit. Or maybe I just did it because it felt like the right thing to do. He tipped his hat to her and walked away, his long strides carrying him down the street toward the livery stable where he had apparently left his horse. Evangeline watched him go, her mind still spinning with everything that had happened in the span of a single afternoon. She climbed the stairs to her small room and sat on the narrow bed, staring at her hands. In St. Louis, Charles Whitmore had held these hands and promised her the world. He had lied with such sincerity that she had never suspected, never questioned. When the truth came out, she had felt like the world's biggest fool. But Cole Brennan was different, she sensed that. He had made no grand promises, no declarations of love. He had simply offered a practical solution to a difficult problem, and he had been honest about his motives. There was something refreshing in that honesty, something that made her want to trust him despite her recent history with trusting men. Sleep came slowly that night, and her dreams were confused jumbles of the past and present, of Charles's false smile and Cole's steady gaze, of Martha Henley's angry face and Mary's surprised expression. When she woke, the sun was already well up, and she realized she had slept later than usual. She dressed in another of her St. Louis dresses, this one a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her dark blonde hair up in a simple style. When she looked in the small mirror above the wash basin, she barely recognized herself. 6 months of stress and worry had made her face thinner, brought out the sharp angles of her cheekbones. But her eyes were clearer this morning, less haunted. For the first time since arriving in Redemption, she felt a flutter of something that might have been hope, Mrs. Ferguson arrived mid-morning with her son-in-law's wagon to help move Evangeline's belongings. The older woman was brisk and efficient, directing the younger man to carry Evangeline's trunk and bags without comment. But once they were alone in the wagon, rumbling toward the boarding house, Mrs. Ferguson turned to Evangeline with a measuring look. "Cole Brennan is a good man," she said without preamble. "One of the best. His father, Thomas, was my late husband's closest friend. I have known Cole since he was a boy, and I am telling you now that if he has offered you his protection and his name, it is because he believes you deserve both." "I am not sure I do," Evangeline said quietly. "Deserve them, I mean. The town seems to have other opinions." Mrs. Ferguson made a dismissive sound. "The town is full of bored people who would rather create drama than mind their own business. I have seen you around these past months, Miss Porter. You have conducted yourself with dignity despite the treatment you have received. That speaks to your character far more than any gossip." "Thank you, Mrs. Ferguson. That means a great deal to me. Call me Judith," the older woman said. "And you should know that Cole has not brought a woman around in the 5 years since his father died. There have been plenty who tried to catch his attention, but he kept them all at arm's length. If he has chosen you, there is a reason beyond mere convenience." Evangeline did not know what to say to that, so she remained silent. The boarding house was warm and welcoming, with lace curtains at the windows and the smell of baking bread drifting from the kitchen. Judith showed her to a spacious room on the second floor with a large bed, a wardrobe, a writing desk, and a cushioned chair by the window. It was far nicer than the cramped space above the general store. "You will take your meals downstairs with the other boarders," Judith explained. "Breakfast at 7, dinner at noon, supper at 6. If you need anything washed, leave it in the basket by your door on Mondays. The privy is out back and there is a bathing room at the end of the hall. Hot water costs extra, but I suspect Cole made arrangements for that as well." "He seems to have thought of everything," Evangeline murmured. "That is Cole," Judith said with a fond smile. "He is a planner, always has been. Drives some people mad, but it means he rarely gets caught unprepared." After Judith left, Evangeline unpacked her belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. She had just finished when there was a knock at the door. "Miss Porter." "You have a visitor downstairs," called one of the other boarders. Evangeline descended to find Cole waiting in the parlor, hat in hand. He looked freshly shaved and was wearing a clean shirt, though his boots still bore the dust of the ranch. "Good morning," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "I thought you might like to see the ranch today, get a feel for what you might be taking on if we go through with this." "That seems wise," Evangeline agreed. She fetched her shawl and followed him outside, where a wagon stood waiting. It was a practical conveyance, sturdy and well-maintained, with a bench seat upholstered in worn leather. Cole helped her up onto the seat with easy courtesy, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The horses, a matched pair of chestnuts, tossed their heads and started forward at his command. The road north out of Redemption was well-traveled, cutting through scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. The sky was a brilliant blue, unmarred by clouds, and the spring air held a pleasant warmth that hinted at the scorching summer to come. In the distance, Evangeline could see the low hills Cole had mentioned, rising like gentle waves against the horizon. "It is beautiful country," she said, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "It can be harsh too," Cole said. "Summers get brutal and droughts can last for months. But there is something honest about it, you know. The land does not pretend to be anything other than what it is." Evangeline thought about that as they rode. She had spent most of her life in St. Louis, a city where appearances were everything, where people wore masks and told pretty lies. There was something appealing about the idea of a place that was simply itself, without pretense or artifice. After about 40 minutes, they crested a rise and the ranch came into view below. It was situated in a valley just as Cole had described, with a creek running along the western edge and cottonwood trees providing shade near the buildings. The main house was a low, sprawling structure built from local stone and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The barn was large and solid, painted red with white trim, and beyond it she could see several other outbuildings and the bunkhouse Cole had mentioned. Cattle dotted the pastures, mostly red and white Herefords, and she could see several men on horseback working among them. It looked prosperous and well-maintained, a testament to hard work and careful management. "What do you think?" Cole asked, and she heard genuine curiosity in his voice as if her opinion mattered to him. "I think it looks like a real home," Evangeline said honestly, "like a place where someone could build a life." Cole's smile was slow and genuine. "That is what I have been trying to do here. Build something that lasts, something that means something." He drove the wagon down into the valley and pulled up in front of the house. Before he could help her down, the front door opened and a small, wiry man in his 60s stepped out onto the porch. He had sun-weathered skin, bright blue eyes, and a neatly trimmed white beard. "So the rumors are true," the man said, looking between Cole and Evangeline with undisguised interest. "You brought a lady home." "Evangeline, this is Hank Talbot," Cole said, helping her down from the wagon. "He is my foreman and has been with the ranch since my father's time. Hank, this is Miss Evangeline Porter, my fiancée." Hank's eyebrows rose impressively high, but after a moment, his weathered face creased into a smile. "Well, I will be," Cole Brennan finally caught. "Your father would be right pleased, son." He turned to Evangeline and executed a courtly bow. "It is an honor to meet you, Miss Porter. Welcome to the Brennan Ranch." "Thank you, Mr. Talbot. I am pleased to meet you as well. Just Hank, please. Mr. Talbot makes me sound old." He winked at her, and Evangeline found herself smiling despite her nervousness. Cole led her into the house, and Evangeline looked around with curiosity. The interior was spacious and surprisingly tidy for a bachelor household. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well-made, and there were touches that spoke of a woman's influence long ago. Embroidered pillows on the sofa, lace curtains at the windows, a beautiful quilt draped over the back of a rocking chair. "My mother's handiwork," Cole said, noticing her gaze. "She passed when I was 15, but my father could never bring himself to change much. I have kept it the same, mostly because I like remembering her." "It is lovely," Evangeline said, touching the quilt gently. The stitching was exquisite, tiny, perfect stitches forming an intricate star pattern. Cole showed her the rest of the house. A kitchen with a modern cast-iron stove, 3 bedrooms, a study lined with bookshelves, and a small room that had once been a nursery but now held storage. Everything was clean and orderly, though there was a masculine starkness to it, as if no one had added a personal touch in years. "I know it is not fancy," Cole said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Nothing like what you must have been used to in St. Louis. It is better than anything in St. Louis," Evangeline said firmly. "It is real, honest. I like it very much." They returned to the main room, and Cole gestured for her to sit on the sofa while he took the rocking chair across from her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, and Evangeline was struck again by how surreal this situation was. 3 days ago, she had been a pariah in redemption, barely scraping by, unsure of her future. Now she was sitting in a rancher's parlor, wearing a fake engagement ring that Cole had produced from somewhere, discussing a marriage of convenience that felt increasingly less convenient and more real with every passing hour. "Are you having second thoughts?" Cole asked quietly. "Are you?" Evangeline countered. "No," he said without hesitation. "This feels right to me. I cannot explain it better than that." "I am frightened," Evangeline admitted. "Not of you, but of making another mistake. I trusted the wrong person before, and it cost me everything. My reputation, my family's respect, my sense of who I was. I do not think I could survive that kind of betrayal again." Cole leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression earnest. "I understand that fear, I truly do. All I can tell you is that I will never deliberately hurt you. I will keep my word, and I will respect the terms we set. If you decide to leave, I will let you go with no hard feelings. And if you decide to stay, I will do everything in my power to make sure you never regret it." There was such sincerity in his voice that Evangeline felt the last of her resistance crumble. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of scandal and judgment by herself. The idea of having someone in her corner, someone who would defend her and protect her and simply be there, was almost overwhelming. "All right," she said. "Let us do this properly then. Let us plan a real wedding, announce a real engagement, and see where this path leads us." Cole's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "You mean it." "I mean it. Though I should warn you that I know nothing about ranching, and I am not much of a cook. We have a cook who comes in 3 times a week to prepare meals and teach me not to burn water," Cole said with a laugh. "And you do not need to know about ranching. That is my job. Your job is just to be yourself." They talked for another hour, discussing practical matters like the wedding date and what kind of ceremony they wanted. Cole suggested something simple in the church with just a few witnesses, and Evangeline agreed readily. Neither of them wanted a big fuss, though they both knew the town would make one regardless. When the sun started to sink toward the hills, Cole drove her back to the boarding house. As they rolled through the gates of redemption, Evangeline noticed that people stopped to stare, but the looks were different now. There was still curiosity, but the naked hostility had been replaced by uncertainty. She was no longer an easy target, no longer a woman alone. She was Cole Brennan's intended, and that changed everything. "I will come by tomorrow morning," Cole said as he helped her down from the wagon. "We should go to the general store together, pick out fabric for your wedding dress if you want to make one, or order one from the catalog if you prefer." "I can make a dress," Evangeline said. "I am actually a fair hand with a needle." "Another skill I do not have," Cole said with a grin. "We are going to make quite a team." He tipped his hat to her and drove away, leaving Evangeline standing on the porch of the boarding house with a strange feeling in her chest that might have been happiness. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Cole came by every morning and they fell into an easy routine. They would have breakfast together at the boarding house, then attend to various errands in town. Sometimes they visited the ranch, where Evangeline began to learn the rhythms of ranch life. Other times they simply walked around Redemption, making themselves visible as a couple, slowly changing the narrative of who Evangeline Porter was. The transformation in how people treated her was remarkable. Women who had crossed the street to avoid her now nodded politely. Shopkeepers who had served her with barely concealed disdain now greeted her warmly and asked about her wedding plans. It was as if Cole's acceptance of her had given everyone else permission to do the same. Not everyone was pleased, of course. Martha Henley remained coldly hostile, and there were a few other women who seemed to resent Evangeline's sudden elevation in status. But their numbers were small, and they were careful not to be too open in their disapproval. Cole Brennan was too well respected, too important to the local economy, for anyone to risk offending him directly. Evangeline found herself genuinely enjoying Cole's company. He was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and remembered small details she mentioned. He was unfailingly courteous but never stuffy, protective but never overbearing. Slowly, carefully, she felt herself beginning to trust him. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after their engagement had been announced, they were sitting on the porch of the ranch house watching the sun set. Hank and the other ranch hands had finished for the day and were in the bunkhouse playing cards. The air was filled with the sounds of evening, cattle lowing in the distance, crickets beginning their nightly chorus, the soft rustle of wind through the cottonwoods. "The preacher is coming through next week," Cole said. "If you still want to go through with this." Evangeline looked at him, at his profile silhouetted against the orange and pink sky. Over the past weeks, she had learned many things about Cole Brennan. She had learned that he woke before dawn every morning and checked on his horses before doing anything else. She had learned that he read poetry when he thought no one was watching, and that his favorite was Whitman. She had learned that he had a scar on his left shoulder from being thrown into a fence post by an ornery bull, and another on his right hand from a broken bottle during a saloon fight when he was 19. She had learned that he was patient and kind, that he treated his ranch hands with respect and paid them fairly, that he donated money to the church, even though he rarely attended services. She had learned that he still missed his parents terribly, that he sometimes talked to his father's grave when he had a difficult decision to make, that he kept his mother's Bible on his bedside table and read from it when he could not sleep. And she had learned, slowly and without quite meaning to, that she was falling in love with him. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. After Charles, she had sworn never to trust her heart to anyone again, but Cole was not Charles. Cole was real and solid and true, and being with him felt like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. "I want to go through with it," she said quietly. "But Cole, I need to be honest with you about something." He turned to look at her, his expression open and attentive. "What is it?" "This arrangement, this marriage of convenience we have been planning, I do not think I can do that anymore. I have feelings for you, real feelings, and I do not know how to be married to you and keep those feelings separate from everything else." Cole was silent for a long moment, and Evangeline's heart sank. She had ruined it, had complicated something that was supposed to be simple. She opened her mouth to take it back, to apologize, but Cole reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Evangeline," he said, his voice rough, "I have been half in love with you since the day you walked into that saloon and did not flinch when Martha Henley threw that bottle at your head. I have been fully in love with you since you told me about Charles, and I saw the strength it took for you to trust me with that story. I suggested a marriage of convenience because I thought it was what you needed, what you could accept. But if you are willing to make this real, then that is all I have wanted from the beginning." Evangeline felt tears prick her eyes. "You love me." "I love you," Cole confirmed. "I love your courage and your grace. I love the way you hum while you sew. I love how you talk to the horses like they are people. I love that you laugh at my terrible jokes and correct my grammar when I write letters. I love you, Evangeline Porter, and I want to marry you for real, not as an arrangement but as a true partnership." "I love you too," Evangeline whispered. And then Cole was pulling her into his arms, and she was crying and laughing at the same time. He kissed her then, a gentle, searching kiss that tasted of coffee and hope. Evangeline melted into him, her hands coming up to cup his face, feeling the rasp of his stubble against her palms. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and urgent, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Well," Cole said, his forehead resting against hers, "that changes things." "For the better, I hope," Evangeline said, "definitely for the better." They sat on the porch as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, making new plans for their future. This would not be a marriage of convenience, but a real marriage in every sense. They talked about children, about growing the ranch, about building a life together that was filled with love and purpose. When Cole finally drove her back to town that night, Evangeline felt like she was floating. Everything had changed, and yet nothing had changed. She was still going to marry Cole Brennan next week when the preacher came through. But now she would be marrying him for love, and that made all the difference in the world. The wedding took place on a bright Tuesday morning in late April. The church was small and simple, with wooden pews and windows that let in streams of golden sunlight. Evangeline wore a dress she had made herself from cream-colored silk, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Cole had picked for her that morning. Judith Ferguson stood as her witness, and Hank Talbot stood for Cole. The preacher, a jovial man in his 50s named Reverend Thompson, performed a simple but heartfelt ceremony. When it came time for the vows, Cole looked into Evangeline's eyes and spoke with such conviction that several people in the small congregation wiped away tears. "I, Cole Brennan, take you, Evangeline Porter, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to stand by your side through joy and sorrow, prosperity and hardship. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your greatest supporter. This I vow before God and these witnesses." Evangeline's voice shook only slightly as she repeated her own vows, promising to love and honor Cole, to be his partner and helpmate, to build a life with him based on mutual respect and affection. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife and invited Cole to kiss his bride, Cole cupped Evangeline's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart overflow. The small congregation erupted in applause, and Evangeline heard Hank let out a whoop of celebration. They signed the marriage certificate in the church office, making it official, and then emerged into the sunlight as Mr. and Mrs. Cole Brennan. A surprising number of townspeople had gathered outside the church, and they showered the newlyweds with rice and good wishes. Even Martha Henley was there, standing at the edge of the crowd. When Evangeline met her eyes, the older woman gave a stiff nod that might have been acknowledgement or even grudging respect. Evangeline nodded back, feeling generous in her happiness. There was a small reception at Mary's kitchen, where the proprietress had prepared a feast of roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and a beautiful cake with white frosting. The whole town seemed to turn out, and Evangeline was overwhelmed by the number of people who came to congratulate them and wish them well. "Looks like you are officially one of us now," Samuel Wright said, shaking Cole's hand and smiling at Evangeline. "Welcome to redemption, Mrs. Brennan." "Thank you, Samuel, for everything." The old saloon keeper's eyes twinkled. "You just needed someone to stand up for you is all. Cole did the right thing, and I am glad it all worked out." Later, as the sun began to set, Cole and Evangeline climbed into the wagon for the drive out to the ranch. They had both changed into more practical clothes, and Evangeline's cream silk wedding dress was carefully folded in a box on the wagon bed. As they left redemption behind, Cole reached over and took Evangeline's hand. "Happy, Mrs. Brennan?" "Happier than I have been in a very long time, Mr. Brennan," Evangeline replied. The ranch looked beautiful in the evening light, peaceful and welcoming. Hank and the other hands had made themselves scarce, giving the newlyweds privacy. Cole helped Evangeline down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up in his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying you over the threshold," Cole said. "It is tradition." He carried her into the house and set her down gently in the main room. The house had been cleaned and tidied, and there were fresh flowers in vases on every surface. Someone, probably Hank, had even lit candles, filling the room with soft, flickering light. "This is beautiful," Evangeline said, turning in a slow circle. "I am glad you like it. I wanted your first night here as my wife to be special." Evangeline turned to face him, her heart pounding. They had talked about this, about their wedding night, and Cole had promised to follow her lead, to let her set the pace. But now, looking at him in the candlelight, she found that she had no doubts, no fears. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to start their new life together in every way. "Cole," she said softly, "I am ready for all of this, for us." His eyes darkened with desire, but he moved slowly, giving her time to change her mind. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her gently, reverently, as if she were something precious and fragile. Evangeline leaned into the kiss, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer. "Are you sure?" Cole murmured against her lips. "I am sure. I love you, Cole Brennan. I want to be your wife in every way." Cole's answer was to kiss her again, deeper this time, more passionately. He led her to the bedroom they would now share, the room that had been his alone but was now theirs together. The bed was large and covered in his mother's beautiful quilts, and the windows were open, letting in the cool night breeze. What followed was tender and sweet, a joining that was as much about emotion as physical desire. Cole was patient and gentle, making sure Evangeline felt safe and cherished. And when they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness, of two people who belonged together finding their way home. Afterward, they lay tangled in each other's arms, listening to the night sounds drifting through the open window. Evangeline rested her head on Cole's chest, feeling the steady thump of his heartbeat beneath her ear. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Cole asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "For seeing me when no one else did, for believing in me. For giving me a home and a future and love." Cole pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You gave me all of those things too, Evangeline. You just do not realize it yet. Before you, I was just going through the motions, living but not really alive. You changed everything." They talked quietly into the night, making plans and sharing dreams. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, and they drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's warmth. The first months of their marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. Evangeline threw herself into learning how to run the ranch household, though she made it clear she had no intention of being a traditional rancher's wife who stayed inside all day. She wanted to understand the business, to be a true partner to Cole. Hank became her teacher, showing her the basics of ranch management. She learned how to keep the books, how to assess cattle quality, how to negotiate with buyers. She learned to ride properly, spending hours in the saddle until her legs ached and her hands were blistered from the reins. Cole watched her efforts with pride and admiration, never once suggesting she should do less or leave the man's work to him. The house became a true home under Evangeline's care. She added her own touches to the rooms, small things that made the space feel lived in and loved. She planted a garden near the kitchen, growing vegetables and herbs. She made new curtains for the windows and recovered the cushions on the dining chairs. She filled the bookshelves in the study with volumes ordered from catalogs, creating a small library they could both enjoy. In town, the whispers about Evangeline finally died away, replaced by respect and even admiration. She became known as a capable, intelligent woman who was not afraid of hard work. She made friends with some of the other ranch wives, and even won over a few of the women who had been hostile to her in the beginning. Martha Henley remained aloof, but one day, nearly 6 months after the wedding, she approached Evangeline in the general store. "Mrs. Brennan," Martha said stiffly, "I wonder if I might have a word." Evangeline set down the bolt of fabric she had been examining and gave the older woman her full attention. "Of course, Mrs. Henley." Martha looked uncomfortable, her face flushed. "I owe you an apology. I judged you unfairly when you first came to Redemption. I believed gossip without knowing the truth, and I was cruel to you. That was wrong of me, and I am sorry." Evangeline was so surprised she could not speak for a moment. Of all the things she had expected, a genuine apology from Martha Henley was not one of them. "I appreciate that, Mrs. Henley," she said finally. "Thank you for having the courage to say so." Martha nodded, looking relieved. "You have proven yourself a good wife to Cole and a credit to this community. I should have given you a chance from the beginning." They would never be close friends, but from that day forward, there was a civility between them that had not existed before. It was another sign that Evangeline had truly found her place in Redemption. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, Evangeline and Cole's love deepened and grew. They weathered their first real argument, a disagreement about whether to buy more land or invest in improving their existing pastures, and learned how to navigate conflict with respect and compromise. They celebrated their first Christmas together, decorating the house with pine boughs and holly, exchanging simple but heartfelt gifts. In January, nearly 9 months after their wedding, Evangeline realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another few weeks to be sure, then went to see Dr. Harrison, the town physician. When he confirmed her suspicions, she felt a rush of joy so intense it took her breath away. She told Cole that evening after supper. They were sitting by the fire in the main room, and Cole was reading aloud from one of the new books she had ordered. Evangeline interrupted him mid-sentence. "Cole, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the book, his expression instantly alert. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, actually." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Cole simply stared at her as if he could not quite process the words. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to the bunkhouse. "A baby, truly, truly. Dr. Harrison says I am about 2 months along, which means the baby should come in late summer." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he finally released her, she saw that his eyes were bright with tears. "You have made me the happiest man alive, Evangeline Brennan." "We made this together," Evangeline said, her own eyes damp. "This is our baby, our future." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Evangeline was plagued by morning sickness for the first few months. Cole was attentive and protective, fussing over her in a way that was both endearing and occasionally irritating. Hank and the ranch hands treated her like she was made of glass, which amused her to no end. In town, the news of the coming baby was met with genuine excitement. Even the women who had once called her a Jezebel now congratulated her warmly and offered advice. Judith Ferguson took it upon herself to organize a quilting bee to make a baby blanket, and to Evangeline's amazement, nearly every woman in town participated. As summer arrived and Evangeline's belly swelled, she found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she had been alone and frightened, fleeing a scandal that had destroyed her reputation and her sense of self. Now she was married to a man she loved deeply, carrying his child, surrounded by a community that had come to accept and even cherish her. The baby came on a sweltering August afternoon, after a labor that lasted 12 hours. Dr. Harrison attended the birth, along with Judith Ferguson and 2 other experienced mothers from town. Cole paced the porch outside, driven from the room by the doctor who said he was making Evangeline more nervous. When the baby finally arrived, it was a boy, healthy and strong, with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. "Doctor." Harrison cleaned him up and wrapped him in the quilt the town women had made, then handed him to Evangeline. "You have a fine son, Mrs. Brennan," he said with a smile. Evangeline looked down at the tiny face, at the dark hair and the eyes that were still unfocused, but would someday be either her blue or Cole's green. She felt a love so profound it was almost painful, a fierce protective instinct that she knew would shape the rest of her life. "Let Cole in," she said to Judith. "He needs to meet his son." Cole burst through the door moments later, his face wild with worry and hope. When he saw Evangeline propped up against the pillows, tired but radiant, holding their son, he stumbled to a halt. "Is he all right? Are you all right?" His voice was hoarse. "We are both perfect," Evangeline said. "Come meet your son." Cole approached slowly, reverently, as if approaching something sacred. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby, and Evangeline saw wonder and love and awe chase across his face. "He is beautiful," Cole whispered. "He looks like you. He has your chin," Evangeline said with a tired smile. "Poor thing." Cole laughed, a sound that was half joy and half sob. "Can I hold him?" Evangeline carefully transferred the baby into Cole's arms, showing him how to support the tiny head. Cole held his son with such tenderness that Evangeline felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Hello, little one," Cole murmured. "I am your papa. And I promise I am going to do everything I can to make sure you grow up strong and happy and loved." "What should we name him?" Evangeline asked. They had discussed names but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son's face, the answer seemed obvious. "Thomas," Cole said. "After my father, if that is all right with you." "Thomas Brennan," Evangeline said, testing the name. "I like it. Thomas Cole Brennan." "Perfect," Cole agreed. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning to care for this tiny person who had become the center of their world. Hank and the ranch hands were utterly besotted with baby Thomas, taking turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to coax out a smile. The whole town seemed to celebrate the birth, with visitors stopping by daily to bring food, gifts, and congratulations. One afternoon, about a month after Thomas was born, Evangeline was sitting on the porch with the baby in her arms when she saw a wagon approaching. To her surprise, it was Martha Henley. The older woman climbed down from the wagon and approached the porch with something wrapped in tissue paper. "Mrs. Brennan, I hope I am not intruding," Martha said. "I wanted to bring something for the baby." "Not at all, Mrs. Henley. Please come sit." Martha sat in the rocking chair and handed over the package. Evangeline unwrapped it to find a beautifully knitted baby sweater in soft blue yarn. "I made it myself," Martha said, a touch of pride in her voice. "I know I have not been the kindest to you, but I wanted to do this for your son." "Every baby deserves a warm sweater." Evangeline felt her eyes well up. "It is beautiful, Martha. Thank you so much." They sat together for a while, watching Thomas sleep, and talked about babies and raising children. It was the most civil, even warm conversation they had ever had, and when Martha finally left, Evangeline felt like a circle had been closed. The years that followed were good ones, filled with hard work and laughter and love. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who adored following his father around the ranch. 2 years after his birth, Evangeline delivered a daughter they named Clara, after Cole's mother. Clara had her mother's blonde hair and her father's green eyes, and from the moment she could walk, she was getting into everything. The ranch prospered under Cole and Evangeline's joint management. They expanded their herds, bought additional land, and built a reputation for quality cattle. Evangeline proved to have a head for business, negotiating deals that increased their profits and establishing relationships with buyers throughout Texas and beyond. In town, Evangeline became a respected figure in her own right, known for her intelligence, her fairness, and her willingness to help others. She organized a school for the ranch children, hiring a teacher and providing space in the old barn that they converted into a schoolhouse. She started a lending library in the church basement, donating her own books and soliciting donations from others. Cole watched her with pride and amazement, marveling at how this woman who had arrived in redemption alone, and frightened, had blossomed into a pillar of the community. Their love continued to grow deeper with each passing year, weathering the challenges that life threw at them with grace and partnership. One evening, nearly 6 years after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch watching Thomas and Clara play in the yard. Thomas was 8 now, tall for his age and serious like his father. Clara was 4, a whirlwind of energy and mischief. A third child, a son named James, was asleep in his cradle inside. "Do you ever think about that day in the saloon?" Cole asked, his hand finding Evangeline's in the space between their rocking chairs. "Sometimes," Evangeline admitted, "it feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to different people." "In some ways it did," Cole said. "We are not the same people we were then." "No," Evangeline agreed. "We are better, stronger, together." "Do you have any regrets?" Evangeline turned to look at him, at this man who had given her everything, who had stood up for her when no one else would, who had loved her when she had forgotten how to love herself. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "Everything that happened, all the pain and scandal and fear, it led me here. To you, to our children, to this life. I would go through it all again if it meant ending up exactly where I am now. Cole raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I love you, Evangeline Brennan. More than words can say. I love you too, Cole Brennan, forever and always. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Evangeline felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The town gossips had called her a Jezebel, had tried to destroy her with their whispers and judgment. But Cole had called her his wife, and in doing so, he had silenced them all. More than that, he had given her back herself. He had shown her that she was worthy of love, of respect, of happiness. He had stood beside her as she rebuilt her life from the ashes of scandal, and together they had created something beautiful and lasting. Their story had started with a lie, a desperate gambit to save face in front of hostile townspeople. But it had become something true and real and enduring. It had become a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult, of believing in someone when no one else would. As the years continued to pass, the Brennan family became legendary in redemption. People spoke of Cole and Evangeline's love with admiration and even a touch of envy. They became the example that young couples aspired to, proof that real love could overcome any obstacle. Thomas grew up to be a fine young man who went to college in San Antonio before returning to help run the ranch. Clara became a teacher, taking over the school that her mother had founded. James, the youngest, inherited his mother's head for business and his father's love of the land, eventually expanding the ranch's operations even further. Cole and Evangeline grew old together, their love never dimming even as their hair turned gray and their bodies slowed. They spent their later years on that same porch where so much of their story had unfolded, watching their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once run. The town of Redemption grew and changed over the decades, evolving from a rough cattle town into a proper small city. But the story of Cole and Evangeline Brennan remained constant, told and retold to each new generation. It became a part of the town's history, a reminder that everyone deserves a second chance, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stand up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the town threw a massive celebration. The church was decorated with flowers, and it seemed like everyone in Redemption and the surrounding counties turned out to honor the couple who had become an institution. Standing before the crowd, Cole's arm around Evangeline's waist, they renewed their vows. Cole's voice was shakier than it had been 50 years ago, but no less sincere. I, Cole Brennan, reaffirm my vows to you, Evangeline. You are still the love of my life, my partner, my best friend. Thank you for 50 years of adventure, laughter, challenges, and joy. I would marry you again in a heartbeat. Evangeline, her own voice trembling with emotion, responded in kind. I, Evangeline Brennan, reaffirm my vows to you, Cole. You saved me when I needed saving, loved me when I felt unlovable, and gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You are my hero, my love, my everything. Here is to 50 more years. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and their children and grandchildren rushed forward to embrace them. It was a moment of pure joy, a celebration not just of their marriage but of the life they had built together, the family they had raised, the community they had served. That night, back at the ranch that had been their home for half a century, Cole and Evangeline sat on their beloved porch one more time. The house was quiet now, all the visitors gone, just the two of them and the stars overhead. 50 years, Cole mused. Where did the time go? Into a life well lived, Evangeline replied. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. We made a good team, Cole Brennan. The best team, Cole agreed. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. For taking a chance on a cowboy who offered you a crazy solution to an impossible problem. Thank you for seeing me, Evangeline said, "for looking past the gossip and the scandal and seeing who I really was. You gave me back my life, Cole. You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts beating in sync. Around them, the ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms. The cattle were quiet in their pastures. The horses shuffled in the barn. The cottonwood trees rustled gently in the breeze. In the distance, they could see the lights of redemption twinkling like earthbound stars. That town, which had once been so hostile and unwelcoming, had become their home, the place where their story had unfolded and their legacy had been built. Evangeline thought about the young woman she had been, arriving in redemption with nothing but a trunk of fancy dresses and a heart full of hurt and fear. She thought about how close she had come to giving up, to letting the judgment and gossip drive her away. She thought about the moment Cole Brennan had walked into that saloon and changed her life forever with a few simple words. "The town gossips called me a Jezebel," she said softly, "and I called you my wife," Cole finished, squeezing her hand, "and silenced them all." "You did more than silence them," Evangeline said. "You showed them who I really was. You gave me the chance to prove myself. Everything good in my life came from that moment, Cole, everything." "Everything good in my life came from that moment too," Cole said. "I was just existing before you, Evangeline. You taught me how to truly live." As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Cole and Evangeline remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's presence and the memories of 50 years of marriage. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative. They had raised children and built a business. They had laughed and cried, fought and made up, struggled and triumphed. Through it all, they had done it together, partners in every sense of the word. Their love had been tested by time and circumstance, and had emerged stronger than ever, a shining example of what marriage could be when built on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine affection, and unwavering commitment. When they finally went inside, moving slowly with the care of people whose bodies had aged but whose spirits remained young, they paused at the threshold. Cole turned to Evangeline with a smile. "Shall I carry you over?" he asked, echoing that first night 50 years ago. Evangeline laughed, the sound still bright and joyful despite the passage of decades. "I think we would both end up on the floor." "Probably," Cole agreed, "but we would be together." "Always together," Evangeline affirmed. They walked inside hand in hand, closing the door on another perfect day in a life filled with them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to cherish. But tonight they had each other, and that was all they needed. The ranch slept peacefully under the Texas stars, a testament to hard work and true love. And in the town of Redemption, the story of Cole and Evangeline Brennan lived on, inspiring generations with its message of courage, redemption, and the transformative power of love. Years later, when Cole and Evangeline had both passed into legend, their great-grandchildren would still tell the story. They would speak of how a young woman arrived in redemption alone and afraid, fleeing scandal and searching for a fresh start. They would tell of the cowboy who stood up for her when no one else would, who offered her his name and his protection. They would recount how fake engagement became real love, how two lonely souls found each other and built something extraordinary. The story would be embellished over time, as all good stories are. Some versions would claim that Cole had fought off a gang of outlaws to protect Evangeline's honor. Others would say that Evangeline had been a secret heiress, or that she had saved Cole's life during a stampede. But the heart of the story always remained the same. Love conquers all, everyone deserves a second chance, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for what is right. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of their descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the Brennan family story. The house remained largely as Cole and Evangeline had left it, preserved as a reminder of the past and an inspiration for the future. Visitors from all over Texas came to see the legendary Brennan Ranch and hear the story of its founders, in the town of Redemption, a statue was erected in the town square. It depicted a man and a woman standing together, their hands clasped, looking toward the horizon. The plaque at the base read, "Cole and Evangeline Brennan, whose love story taught us that redemption is always possible and that true love knows no boundaries." The statue became a favorite spot for wedding proposals, as young men would kneel before their sweethearts and invoke the example of Cole and Evangeline, promising a love as enduring and true. The town's annual Founders' Day celebration always included a special ceremony honoring the Brennans and their contributions to redemption's growth and prosperity. But more than monuments and ceremonies, the real legacy of Cole and Evangeline Brennan lived on in the values they had embodied and passed down. They had shown that character matters more than reputation, that everyone deserves to be judged on their own merits rather than on gossip and assumptions. They had demonstrated that true partnership in marriage means working together, respecting each other's strengths, and supporting each other through challenges. Their love story became a touchstone for the community, a reminder of what was possible when people chose compassion over judgment, courage over conformity, and love over fear. In a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, especially toward women who did not fit society's narrow expectations, Cole and Evangeline's story offered hope and inspiration. The church where they had married became a pilgrimage site for couples seeking blessings on their own unions. The porch where they had spent countless evenings watching the sunset became known as Lover's Porch and was carefully maintained by their descendants. The cottonwood trees that had provided shade for their courtship grew massive and ancient, their branches spreading wide like a benediction over the land. In the end, the story of Cole and Evangeline Brennan was more than just a love story. It was a story about the power of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. It was about the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to see the truth of a person's character. It was about the redemptive power of love and the possibility of new beginnings. The town gossips had called Evangeline Porter a Jezebel, seeking to destroy her with their whispers and their judgment. But Cole Brennan had called her his wife, and in doing so, he had not only silenced the gossips, but had also given Evangeline back her dignity, her hope, and her future. Together, they had built a love that transcended scandal and gossip, a love that grew stronger with each passing year, a love that became legendary. And so their story lived on, told and retold, cherished and celebrated. It lived on in the ranch that bore their name, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. It lived on in the values they had instilled in their family and their community. It lived on in every person who heard their story and felt inspired to be braver, kinder, more compassionate. The cowboy and the woman called Jezebel had found each other in a small Texas town in 1876, and together they had created something beautiful and lasting. Their love story was a gift to everyone who heard it, a reminder that no matter how dark things might seem, redemption and happiness are always possible for those brave enough to reach for them. In the end, that was the true magic of Cole and Evangeline Brennan's story. It was not just about them, but about all of us. It was about the possibility of transformation, the power of love, and the importance of standing up for what is right. It was about seeing the best in people rather than the worst, about offering grace instead of judgment, about choosing hope over cynicism. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that we all have the power to change someone's life for the better, to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, to offer love and acceptance in a world that too often deals in hatred and exclusion. It reminded us that a single act of courage or kindness can ripple out in ways we can never fully predict, creating change that lasts for generations. And so the story of Cole and Evangeline Brennan lived on, a beacon of hope and inspiration in the Wild West and beyond, a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and redemption. The town gossips had called her a Jezebel. The cowboy had called her his wife. And together they had silenced them all, not through anger or revenge, but through the simple, powerful act of building a life filled with love, purpose, and joy. That was their victory, their legacy, and their gift to the world.